Iate Steve Pelletier Yenishe Maidish Gizni Nishli Billigana Bushashin Kina Chitni Dashache Billigana Dashnali. Right now we have a special guest and a special episode where we're going to double up on Michigan basketball players in this 2025 NBA draft class. So without further ado, Kellen Voss of Maize and Brew, who's been on the show multiple times, good friend, down on the ground anytime there's Michigan basketball. Who knew we'd be talking about, Michigan NBA draft prospects so soon after the disastrous last season. So Kellen Voss, let everybody know where they can find you before we get started.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I write for MaizeandBrew.com. It's the SB Nation affiliate that covers Michigan athletics. I'm our lead basketball writer. So I covered pretty much every home game this past year. I've been covering the team for 4 years, and yeah, to say the turnaround was a sight to see would be an understatement in terms of the state the program was in. Even 15 months ago to now is quite astonishing how quickly things have improved.
So of course we're going to talk about Danny Wolf, big man question mark, and Vladislav Goldin, big man exclamation mark. So we'll go into all of their different skills, where they're going to end up being drafted, if they end up getting drafted, break down all that. So we'll get into Danny Wolf and Vladislav Goldin right about now. So we're going to start off with Danny Wolf, since Danny Wolf is the headliner of this and somebody who's been hemmed and hawed, and a lot of people are really in on. First and foremost, Danny Wolf comes from Glencoe, Illinois. Started off his high school career at Lake Forest Academy and then transferred, went over to Northfield Mount Herman School, where he helped them to a 33-6 record. He won their regional title, and then they got to the championship game of their division. I don't believe they won that one. Also, where Danny Wolf, I think, got on everybody's radar in terms of NBA scouting was in the FIBA U20 tournament, where he was on the Israeli team and they won the silver medal. And he was pretty much their lead guy, 17.7 points per game, 12 rebounds in the 7 games that he did play in the FIBA U20 overall there in that FIBA tournament. So let's look into Danny Wolf's stats first before we do anything else. So normally I have the individual stats pulled up on this if you're watching this on YouTube, but this time I decided to go with the Michigan team stats since we are doing the Michigan team and we got Kellen Voss here. It's all Michigan here. I'm the Michigan alum. You're in Michigan. You're at the games. Everything's Michigan. So for Danny Wolf scored 13.2 points per game this last season at Michigan, pulled in 9.7 rebounds, had 3.6 assists, 0.7 steals per game, and 1.4 blocks per game. Shooting splits for Danny Wolf were 56.7% from 2-point range, 33.6% from 3-point range, and then 59.4% from the free throw line. I mean, Kellen, you have a better eye, even though I watched every last single minute of Michigan basketball. I always tell people it's Arizona since I'm here on the ground. It's UNM, New Mexico, since, again, that's my home and that's in my blood. And that Michigan are the three teams that I will definitely watch every single last minute of. But being there live in person, give me your overall impression on Daniel Wolf, because it seems like people are either all in on him or I don't think this is going to work.
I think that in my 4 years of covering this team, he's the most unique player that I have ever watched in terms of that's worn a Michigan uniform, and stuff. In terms of what he's able to do on the court, the playmaking. I think he's a good playmaker in general. I keep seeing way too many people say, "Oh, well, he's an incredible playmaker for a 7-footer." He's just an incredible playmaker. Like, that's just what he is. Like, in terms of the passing angles that he sees, in terms of the pick and roll game that he had with Vlad, in terms of kind of kickstarting Michigan's offense, getting more and more comfortable with the ball in his hands as the year went along. There was just a lot to behold there, with his play. He could score at the rim. He can hit. You'd want to see him be a little more efficient from three, but he can knock down a three when called upon. The flashy dribble moves, all that. I was also impressed with him defensively. I mean, playing next to Vlad definitely helped him because he didn't have to necessarily be an anchor, but I thought he was very good on help side, had a very good basketball IQ, led the Big Ten in rebounds. There's just a lot to like about him. And it seems like casual college basketball fans or basketball fans in general, would see him through social media clips of him doing something viral of the step back threes or the crazy drives or the herky jerky spin move into the lane and stuff. And while I think that those highs are really, really high, I worry about how he projects as a ball handler and how he projects as a defender in the NBA. But in terms of the playmaking alone, I think the upside itself is worth a top 20 pick.
Yeah, we're definitely going to debate on where the ranking is. Spoiler alert, I don't believe he's in the top 20, but very like Kellen said, probably the most unique player in I don't know if in Michigan basketball history, but he's definitely up there, top 3 most unique player in all of college basketball last year. Why is he so unique? Well, Danny Wolf, if you don't know, measured in at 6'10.5" tall without shoes at the combine, weighed in at 251.8 pounds and had a 7'2" and a quarter inch wingspan. So we're essentially looking at 6'11" guy, 250 pounds legitimately with 7'2.5" wingspan. Essentially, he's center size, but Michigan had this guy running offense. It's not like he's just passing from a standstill. They let him bring the ball up the court. A lot of times he did the 4-5 pick and roll, which is something that so many NBA teams want to do when you do have a big man that can handle. And his handle is legitimate. Like, it's a legitimate thing that whoever drafts him, if they don't utilize it, are absolutely moronic. Like you said, the passing and the playmaking is there. I said 3.6 assists, but as I stated with a couple other guys in her old school point guard group last time, like Keyshawn Gilbert and Kasper Siakachonis, and even Yegor Demin to some point, like Danny Wolf probably leads the dude, you got to chill out playmaker. Makes so many stupid passes. Like, it's seriously the king of stupid passes, where every game there were at least 2 of them where I'm like, what are you doing? No, he's a 3rd-year player, but this is also kind of like young guy stuff of being overzealous. I really think that might be like the make or break part of Danny Wolf's game, because if you do buy into the playmaking, you're going to have to give it time, and you're going to have to live with a lot of stupid mistakes in like year 1, year 2. I said it. I have Danny Wolf at 44 partially for that, but I also really, the more I think about it, I'm like, if you buy into Danny Wolf, you essentially have to take him in round 1, just so you even give him that 4 years and give him that time and space to operate. Maybe not so much in like the top, you know, 14 in the lottery, but still 360 total rebounds, which led the Michigan Wolverines, 132 total assists, but then 120 turnovers. Anytime you're over 100 turnovers, it's the problem. How do you count for the turnovers? Because I think that is the number one thing with Danny Wolf, even though, again, great ball handler for that size, is a legitimate playmaker on the move and from all over these places, still gets on the glass and rebounds and does some big man stuff. But how do you foresee that playmaking like working in the NBA if he's still going to make that many mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, obviously the turnovers are the biggest concern, and I do think that the turnovers did come in bunches a lot of times this past year. Sam Vecini pointed this out in his draft guide, and if you go on to KenPom, it confirms it. He has a turnover rate of 24%, which is by quite a decent margin, the highest turnover rate out of any draft eligible player in this draft. I do think a part of it was like Michigan was very intentional about having him having the ball a lot and having the offense run through him. And while he did do some of that playmaking at Yale, this was really the first year of his college basketball career where he was expected to be the lead guy. And so while you mentioned the 3rd-year thing, I think in a sense he was getting his feet wet a lot of the time. And I think a lot of those mistakes came in bunches. A lot of them came early in the year. Unfortunately, it wasn't something that really curbed off at a certain point. It was kind of always just there sitting as a problem. And when Michigan would give up these big runs, a lot of times a culprit of them was Danny Wolf throwing an aggressive pass to thread the needle on a play that only works percent of the time and that kind of a thing. I do wonder if part of that was Michigan encouraging him is the ceiling of Michigan's offense, but also just to help improve him as a basketball player in general. I don't think an NBA team is going to have him have the ball in his hands that much, to be quite honest. So I'm not sure how much of an issue it's going to be. And he's probably like I don't envision a team building an offense around him, just like how Michigan had it. So I'm wondering how he'd be able to like develop his game into a secondary playmaker, as a secondary ball handler, as a guy who's shot faking and finding a shooter off of a short roll or stuff like that. You know, I'm wondering how he's going to be able to adjust to that. And then defensively, you know, I think that too many people are too harsh on him in terms of his defensive ability. I thought he moved his feet pretty well. I thought he did a good job on switches. I thought that Yeah, of course, there were certain guys and certain guys that would take him to the rim, and certain guys that he wasn't as quick then. But like, you're giving that's something you're giving up for the playmaking ability when you're looking at him as a prospect. Obviously, the rebounding was there. It did really help him a lot that Vlad Goldin was always boxing out the other team's best rebounder, so he was kind of just always had a free lane to grab rebounds. That's not going to always be the case in the NBA, but I do think that when you look at him as a rebounder, when you look at him as a playmaker, when you look at him as a passer, his passing ability is absurd in terms of like, yes, he probably takes too many risks, but the fact that he is able to see those angles and is able to complete that play, like, tells you that he has the skill to not only see that, but to facilitate that and execute that. So I do think that he'll be able to have a place in the NBA if he's able to learn how to thrive as a secondary playmaker in offensive sets.
Yeah, Danny's another guy too that I'm like, he has to be reined in, but you don't have to fire him up in terms of playmaking. And I've said many, many, many times on this show before, I would rather invest in the guy you have to rein in than the guy you have to fire up. Because normally the guy you have to fire up either can't see it or doesn't want to do it. And with Danny, it is the case that he wants to do it. And your point about this basically being year one for his playmaking abilities and giving the ball and stuff. Yeah, absolutely. That Yale offense, it was meaning like, you're big. We don't have many guys this big in the Ivy League. So go out there and play like it's 1992. Knock them down and, kick out and stuff like that. Occasionally pop threes. So that is part of it for sure. I'll get to the defense here in a minute, but the other concerning part on offense is you're not very efficient, like 55.9% true shooting percentage, about average. Not the leading scorer for Michigan, too. If you just break down the conference numbers as well, that ends up being around the same 13.9 points per game. But here you're like, okay, now I can start to see a little bit more. 53.4% from 2-point range, 35.4% from 3-point range, and then it's still around 59% from the free throw line, and all of that in the conference numbers ends up equaling 54.9%. Like, even though the shooting numbers improve, it's like, there's still a lot of inefficiency there. And I really think part of what's dragging it down for Danny is the free throw numbers. And again, I hate doing this, but anytime you have somebody whose 3-point percentage seems fine, and then their free throw numbers are bad, it's not normally a good indication of their shooting potential in the league. What say you about Danny Wall's 3-point shooting? Because I think that's the other part of it is, okay, the playmaking's cool, like, you can see it being developed a lot along the way, but, like, the three-point shot has to be the second most important thing. I mean, for some teams, I think it's probably the most important thing. And again, overall true shooting percentage around 55%, even when you break it in a conference where he had better shooting numbers and still 53.4% from 2, it ends up being worse than the overall percentage. Like, what to do about that jumper?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the point I made about him being the perfect player for social media, right? Like, you see all these amazing moments, and you see the step back threes, and you see the crazy passes, and you see this herky jerking dribble that really kind of makes sense in that in that Kyle Anderson slow mo style and stuff. But he was never a knockdown shooter, really. I mean, he wasn't super efficient from there. He took a lot of deep threes, a lot of contested threes. I think he forced a few looks, especially later on in the season. I think he relied on that a little too much, especially when Michigan's offense was kind of cratering a little bit. When more teams started to figure out how to stop the Area 51 pick and roll, it was kind of a last resort for him in a lot of ways. So I do wonder if his numbers were impacted by that. In terms of the efficiency stuff, I think that we, as a basketball consuming public and as a basketball consuming media, are too obsessed with efficiency. Like, yeah, he's not the most efficient player. Yeah, you're not going to put him into a box, but guess what? He's a 7-foot guy that's going to be able to throw assists and find cool and get cool angles for you and help facilitate parts of your offense. You can't, you can't have your cake and eat it too with that kind of a thing, right? Like, if he's working all this stuff out and facilitating and learning how to be this player, like, efficiency is going to be a sacrifice of that. And that's okay. Like, Michigan still had really great team numbers and really great offense with him being inefficient and stuff. Did it suck in some of the losses? Yes. Was it ever a reason that Michigan lost the game? I don't think so. Like I would rather have him trying all that and have him develop and have him use his strengths, even if it sacrifices the efficiency that you're giving up, right? Like part of the intrigue of him is that you can't fit him into a box. He's such a unique player. He's such a unique playmaker. And I think that you give him 10, 15 minutes in the second unit of the right team with a point guard that can set him up and some shooters that he can kick out to, all of a sudden you're looking at an intriguing matchup, right? I mean, we're watching the finals right now. Like, who's to say he couldn't sub in for those Tony Bradley, Thomas Bryant minutes, right? Like, obviously that's a low bar to clear, but like you could kind of see him like facilitating and hitting threes and like holding his own on defense, like in the toughest of tough NBA environments. And so I think if you give him the right coaching staff that's willing to invest in him, that's willing to give him the time to figure out the tempo and figure out the speed and kind of get used to the secondary playmaking and stuff, I think he could have a very lengthy career in the league.
Well, yeah, I disagree with that, but we'll get into the defense here in a minute because I think that is part of it. But the guys that you brought up, especially Thomas Bryant, not exactly an all-world defender, but I think that also is part of the Pacers of like, oh snap, we just needed a big man, and this is all we could get. So this is what it came down to. And the fact that Miles Turner is like such an Iron Man and can play for so long, you don't really need the backup so much. But Danny Wolf, the last thing on the 3-point shot, I just want to bring this in because I think a lot of people see that as like the difference between him being a cool gadget player in the back end versus maybe somebody that can spot start. 113 total threes for Danny this past season on that 33.6%. I think those two are positive indicators. Anytime you can average over 100 threes or take over 100 threes and be 33% or better, to me indicates you're enough of a shooter, or what Jam, my co-host Traffic the Jam Hines always says, a capable shooter. But then if you saw somebody who believes that free throw percentage says something about your mechanics, 59.4%. And the last data point is from that FIBA U20 team in, was a 2023, 2021 on the Israeli team that did win the silver medal team. I guess I should look at my notes before I say anything else like an idiot. The FIBA U20 game, yeah, it's FIBA U20 team that won the silver medal. Danny was second pretty much in terms of minutes. Their leading scorer, but the shooting splits 50.6% from 2-point range, 21.4% from 3-point range, and then 75.9% from the free throw line. So it's like the opposite here. It's only 7 games, so I know a lot of people are going to say small sample size, and it was like,
And it was multiple years ago, so it's like he's improved drastically as a player since then. So I'm not sure how
somehow regressed as a free throw shooter. That's my point with Danny, is inconsistency, I think, is the thing, and patience is really going to be the key with Danny. Let's look at his shot chart before we get into the defense. So Danny Wolf is going to be grouped in this 3-player. It's the Big Ten big man group that I like to call it. So we got, if you're not watching this on YouTube, we got Danny Wolf next to Vladislav Goldin, his teammate, and then Maxime Reynaud, who's from Stanford. I know, yes, Stanford is in the ACC, but hey, what do I know, right? It's big men bonanza, and I think especially Maxime Reynaud and Danny Wolf probably are having, like, people are having the same discussions, having those two different guys of like Reynaud being more the shooter, Danny Wolf being more the ball handler, but same type of thing where it's like an offensive center that can be unique, that not everybody buys in defense. But Danny Wolf's shot chart, 171 shots at the rim for Danny Wolf, 62.6%, knocked down 107 of them. That's a little below average for a big man. 27 of 53 in the paint. That's good. Good percentage there. I think Danny had some more craft and touch to knock down the paint stuff. 14 of 37 in the mid-range. I don't really care about those. Those are just like, hey, I got to put something up, and nobody's going to be asking Danny to shoot mid-range shots in the NBA. Really, any of these guys, even though you'll see Reynaud took a bunch of them in the mid-range. Is this 2025? If you want your center or power forward to shoot a lot of mid-range shots, have fun in the lottery for as long as you're the GM. 5 of 9 on shots in the corner. Danny didn't really take corner threes. That wasn't his role against somebody that got around 24% usage. And then on above the break threes, 33 of 101 shots. Let's break those into the medium zones. Again, this is all courtesy of CBB Analytics, who can break down the shot zones in a bunch of different areas. This is where you start to see like the above the break threes are a concern. 19 of 35 from top of the key, 25.7%. 8 of 28 from the right wing, 28.6%. Neither of those are good. And then 16 of 38 from the left wing, 42.1%. Stellar from that left wing. I think part of what this shows is pretty sure Vlad's working on the right side. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of right side drivers, which leaves Danny more open on the left side. That's why the left wing is really good. And then the corner 3-point shots, that's really where I think like Danny Wolf should work. Number one is like start becoming a knockdown corner 3-point shooter, because that's going to help you with your role in being like a power forward center stretch big that does have the playmaking and all of those stuff. Still really good in the paint. I think those numbers are totally fine at the rim, although I know a lot of other people are not going to like that because they want their big men to be shooting at least around 70%, 65% at the very minimum at the rim. But for how crowded that paint was, Vlad ain't exactly like getting out of the way, and teams were really trying to hold up in the paint. And it's the Big Ten, for crying out loud. Everybody's holed up in the paint on defense. So I still think that's a nice skill set, but the 3-point shot is still a huge question mark for me. As you'll see when I get into the comp with Danny, I think it's going to take a while. And just like with the playmaking, that you're going to have to be patient with it, which again is why I have him knocked down a little bit further. But maybe like that is also the case of why he should be a first rounder, is because like you can see all the skill set. It just might take a while.
I would be shocked if he falls out of the first round, to be honest, just with the playmaking upside, with the shooting capability, with the fact that he's passable on defense. Like a team in the he's not going to fall past the teams that are in the 25s and 30s that can afford to, stash him a little bit, let him develop, let him like not throw him into the fire right away. I don't think he's gonna. I'd be shocked if he falls out of the first round, to be honest.
All right, so let's get into the defense then. 50 total blocks for Danny Wolf, which is only one behind Vlad, who is the leader of this Michigan team. And Danny Wolf's average is better of 1.6 blocks per game compared to Vlad's 1.1. And then the percentages, though, is where Vlad pulls in front, 5.1 block percentage, or excuse me, this is where Danny Wolf does pull in front. Messed it up there. 5.1 block percentage for Danny Wolf, and then 3.9 for Vlad. This is where I do think it's hard to evaluate, because Vlad is the guy that had to be the rim protector of like, we don't want you to move from this spot. We need you to stay here. And Danny was like, you can run around and be, weak side shot blocker, kind of go buck wild. You don't necessarily have to guard the strongest guy. And in the NBA, I think Danny's probably going to be guarding the center wherever he plays, whether it's in the backup or uh, as a starter, if he does end up becoming a starter. But I'm with you. I'm like, I don't think he's necessarily going to get cooked, but I also think he's got that's probably the area for me where I think he's the weakest. Just in terms of, you weren't told to be the big man, you're going to have to learn NBA big man defense and be a better communicator. I mean, Vlad pretty much made it so Danny never had to be a communicator and do that kind of stuff. And you got to, again, chill out. That's pretty much Danny Wolf's whole thing, is like, dude, you got to chill out and be more disciplined. I think on defense is where Dusty Man and staff were kind of like, forget it. We don't need him to be disciplined. We just need him to go wild on both ends, while also putting that controlled chaos into the structure of what we like to do. So and I don't want Danny on the perimeter either. I think that's just a recipe for disaster. I don't see him being able to switch or really guard perimeter guys very well. Even somebody like a Tobias Harris, I think, would probably have a field day with him, just with ball handling and combination of strength and agility. So that's why I really have Danny Wolf at 44. I see all of the great potential. I see all of the great skill set, but I think a lot of it is going to take patience, and I think a lot of it is super inconsistent. And say he gets drafted by like the Hornets. Sorry, Hornets fans, but you don't exactly have the greatest track record for development, especially if they're not like a top 5 guy. And that team already has a ton of terrible defenders. Like, throwing him into that situation, bad idea. But like you said with OKC, if like OKC drafted him, it's like, sure, you don't have to play him right away. You can let him chill, maybe earn some minutes here and there. And he could be like an AJ Mitchell type of player where you're like, it's clear he can work, but you just got to wait for the rest of the way to clear out, and maybe get dealt somewhere else. So I really think Danny Wolf's success comes down to can you be drafted into the right development and structure that can hone these skills rather than just being like, go out there and do whatever, man.
Yeah, uh, totally. I do think I'm going to push back on the stuff about communication. I do think that he was a good communicator in the back of Michigan's defense. I think that him and Vlad kind of shared those responsibilities a little bit. I mean, Vlad definitely had more on his plate in terms of being the anchor of the defense. And yes, Danny essentially always being a help side guy. That's why those block numbers are as large as they are. But I do think that like he didn't necessarily get cooked by certain guys. Like he moved his feet really well. He's a really intelligent defender. He didn't really struggle with foul trouble that much, which can be a problem for big guys entering the league. And so I think that's an underrated factor with him that not a lot of people aren't talking enough about. Um, I think that the rebounding helps when it comes to that. But yeah, I mean, he's not going to wow you with his defense. I don't think he necessarily is the kind of guy you got to hide from defensively either. My worry is that your natural thing as a team is gonna say, if you're just thinking simplistically, like, well, he played his best next to another big man. Do we have to play him next to another big man in order to get him in the best environment on both ends of the floor, which kind of limits what your personnel is. To me, you're right. I mean, to be frank, the Hornets aren't a good situation for anybody to go into. But I think a team like the Trailblazers that have a lot of like individual playmakers, a lot of guys that he can play off of well. If he's playing next to a guy like DeAndre Ayton, I think it could help cover up a lot of those defensive weaknesses and stuff in certain sets against the right matchup in the certain teams. So yeah, maybe that does make him a little bit of a gadget guy, but if he's got that upside, that's what the NBA is all about, right? In terms of his playmaking ability and whatnot. I think he's more than serviceable on the defensive end of the floor, and I don't think that should be. I don't think he should be penalized for that necessarily.
Yeah, that Portland one is good. I think him and Klingon would be like a great yin and yang to each other. Of like, you don't have to over rely on Klingon to do much on offense. You don't have to over rely on Danny to do much on defense, but they're really, versatile and do a bunch of different things on one side of the ball that the other one isn't very consistent at right now. So yeah, that's a good fit there. So when it comes to comps, this is the one where I really, really almost came to the conclusion like Danny Wolf doesn't have a comp, but that's a cop out to me. There are two names I thought about. Number one was Kelly Olynyk, but I'm like, I can't give Danny the Kelly Olynyk comp. Number one, because Kelly Olynyk, maybe one of the few NBA players I feel confident I could beat in a foot race, and Danny Wolf isn't that limited. Also, Kelly Olynyk, you know, absolute knockdown 3-point shooter, super strong, can still do things in the post, and is an elite kind of screen and pick and pop guy. I don't think that's what Danny is. And that just like totally negates his ball handling ability and whatever. I've seen people try and make the Danny Wolf Kelly Olynyk comp. I think it's a lazy, like white guy and a white guy comparison, to be perfectly honest. And again, I don't think Danny is going to be that good of a shooter. And it belittles his ball handling and like things he can do on offense. What I came down to, again, I don't love this comp, but I'm just like, what kind of guy would you buy into developing long term? Maybe not right away. Is this offensive guy, but you still see the shot is there, can do a little bit in playmaking, isn't going to get you cooked on defense, and overall leans more offensive, heavy to be a contributor to even like a playoff team. And I came down to Nikola Vucevic. Again, I don't love that because the ball handling part of the ball handling really throws a wrench in it. Number one, is an NBA team going to buy into that? My answer is no. If I had to give an answer, like gun to the head, your life depends on it. Just because how many other guys do they do that to? And if you're not a top five pick, like you really have to show over time that we're going to give you usage and we buy into you as this unique player. I mean, just look at Jokic, Nikola Jokic. It took like 4 seasons, I think, before they're like, oh, let's just make you the primary playmaker because you really are that good. Or even like a Jimmy Butler who was drafted 30th. It took like 6 seasons before somebody bought into him. It's like, oh yeah, he's a league guy. Let's give him the most usage and stuff like that. It's just part of the NBA. So I think Vucevic, just because it took a while for the 3-point shot to come around, but you saw the rest of the offensive skill, again, better passer than what you thought. And by year 6 or 7, this is like a 20-point per game scorer that does get on the glass. That's solid enough on defense. And I know now, like people kind of clown on him being on the Bulls and stuff, but he's one of the best shooting bigs in the league. He was a really good contributor for an Orlando team that helped get them into playoffs at least. So I think Danny can be at that level again. Maybe not necessarily one-to-one skill set just because of Danny's ball handling ability, but I think if it works out, like that's what you're betting on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and that's why you take him in general, right? Is you're taking him for that upside as a playmaker. You count on him developing as a 3-point shooter, knocking down those corner threes, being in that role in that capacity. In terms of a comp, I mean, yeah, you're right. There's not really an obvious one. I mean, there's you think of the passing ability, I think of Demonis Sabonis a little bit. He's not as good of a in terms of like ball handling and stuff. He's not quite there, but in terms of like the vision and in terms of like an offense running through him, that was the comparison that I had thought of. But yeah, I mean he's a unique guy, and I think some teams are going to be opposed to that in terms of like, hey, if you're this gadget guy that we have to play in a certain uh in a certain situation, like why are we wasting our time? But I do truly think that he's worth it in terms of the investment that you're getting out of him, in terms of, you know, how good he can be offensively. And there's room for him to grow defensively too. And I think in the right situation, in the right developmental situation, I think a team's going to be very happy that they took him.
Yeah, again, anybody out there that can think of a ball handling like five, somebody that is center sized, that can do like 4-5 pick and roll, or maybe 5-5 pick and roll in this case, again, get at us. Let me know what you think in the comments. So, final thing on Danny Wolf, some things to check out on YouTube video references, as I always do. Cash Iggy, probably the number one source for Danny Wolf, like game breakdowns. He has a bunch of different ones there. Again, Cash Iggy's the best draft video breakdown guy on YouTube because he doesn't get in there and yap away about it. It's the game film. Here's what they look like as a scorer, all their shots, even the ones they miss. Here's what they look like playmaking and the turnovers, and then ends it with the defense, and definitely focused on the defense with the Danny Wolf one. A lot of good, a lot of bad. My guys over at NoCeilingsNBA.com, they probably got on board the Danny Wolf train way earlier than everybody else at the end of last season. I believe it's like Maxwell Bomback, Draft Deeper, Stephen Gillespie, like they all brought up Danny Wolf, and I forget which one. Sorry, guys, I forget. One of them did go out on the limb and say that Danny Wolf was going to be a first round pick. So remember, they're the first guys to really get on Danny Wolf ahead of everybody else. And then last but not least, Floor and Ceiling has a nice scouting report on Danny Wolf you can break down here. And I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up our own Kellen Voss here and all the great Danny Wolf covers that he gave on MaizeandBrew.com as well. Do you have any other like Danny Wolf references you would like to promote from anybody else?
No, I think that you hit the nail on the head. That I think that the film breakdown is the best way to go about it. I know Andy Katz had a lot of good stuff about how he continued to thrive as a playmaker as the season went along and stuff throughout Big Ten play and everything. But yeah, I mean the game kind of speaks for itself, and I just came away really just impressed by him and stuff. Yes, he needs to cut down the turnovers. Yes, the 3-point shot needs to be more efficient. Yes, there's question marks on the defensive end, but I think all those risks are worth it when you think of the upside you're getting from him in terms of his playmaking ability, in terms of having a guy that you can throw at the very least, as a guy you can throw into the game in your second unit, make stuff happen in those, you know, dead minutes, you know, at the end of the first quarter, middle of the second quarter, end of the, you know, start of the fourth quarter kind of thing, just to kind of give defenses a different look, something different to prepare for. I see the appeal in him more so than you do. Maybe I'm a little biased in that fact, but I don't think he falls out of the first round. I'd be shocked if he goes any lower than 25. The highest I've seen him in a mock, and this I do think this is too high, but the Ringer had him in a mock recently going 11th to the Trailblazers. I do think that that's too high, but I think that range somewhere between 15 to 25 is that sweet spot where he's going to end up.
Yeah, and I hate when I have to be down on the guys from, you know, the squads that I represent or schools that I've gone to. But with Danny, it really does like fit dependent. I could see somebody taking him 11. Like again, the Blazer one you brought up is perfect fit because of who they already have there. And even the weaknesses Danny have now, they don't necessarily need him to do those things, and they're not gonna like overexpose him necessarily, and they can be patient. And the Blazers have time. It's not exactly like they're trying to, you know, cut for the finals, or even though they made the playoff push last year, it was more of a surprise, and you can tell they're looking at the long game. I mean, they have DeAndre Ayton for crying out loud of you. Not exactly screaming perennial playoff contender with DeAndre Ayton there. So yeah, I think it is more fit dependent, and I am more after the lottery and after whatever cutoff point in any draft for me of like, okay, this is where you can see the clear drop off in consistent talent. And in this draft, it's probably like 11 to 14, somewhere in there. After that, I tend to say draft the guys that are fit proof, as Jam and I like to say, like a Drake Powell, like a Cedric Howard. Those guys are easy to say, hey, just draft them because we know that they have a good wingspan, they're good athletes, they're 3-and-D type of dude. And how's this for a segue? Another guy that I think is kind of fit proof is Vladislav Goldin, another guy on the Michigan roster here who it's like, sure, he might not be sexy and do all the things Danny does, but he's an NBA level big man. So, do you have anything to say on Danny before we transition into Vlad?
No, let's go for it. Let's go for it.
All right, so Vladislav Goldin is from. Apologies to my Russian listeners here. I'm going to attempt any of these Cyrillic alphabet languages, something I very much struggle with. So Nelchik, Kabardino-Balkaria, and Russia. So that's like a republic in the area of Russia. That's where Vladislav Goldin comes from. He was a wrestler, not an amateur wrestler until the age of 15, which I think a lot of us can see in the game with the balance, with the footwork and stuff like that. So Vladislav Goldin was a wrestler until the age of 15. And that 15 is when he started to actually like get into basketball and play and develop there. He played for PBC CSKA Junior for 3 seasons there in Russia. In those 3 seasons, he averaged 8.3 points per game, had 5 rebounds and 1.4 blocks per game. After those 3 seasons, he came over to America and played at the Putnam Science Academy in Putnam, Connecticut. And Vlad went to a couple different schools, if you don't know this. So let's look at his journey in college. Started off at Texas Tech, went there in 2020 for his freshman season, then transferred over to Florida Atlantic, where most of us know him from before the Michigan days. And the Dusty May is where he met Dusty May, and Dusty really bought into him and had 3 very good seasons at Florida Atlantic, was part of that Final Four team with Florida Atlantic, like Elijah Martin, John L. Davis, a couple other guys in there that went on to transfer to other big programs. Elijah Martin, shout out to Elijah Martin, just won the title with Florida. So Vlad was the center on that team and really worked his way into being a very good college basketball player at the center position. And then comes over here with his coach, Dusty May, to Michigan for his 5th and final season. In this last season, Vladislav Goldin scored 16.6 points per game, had 7 rebounds per game, dished out 1.1 assists per game, 0.5 steals per game, 1.4 blocks per game, 2.3 turnovers per game. Shooting splits for Vladislav Goldin were 63.4% from 2-point range, 33.3% from 3-point range. Calm down, people. That was only on 33 attempts from 3, though. Don't think that this is a 3-point shooter. Maybe far in the future, but that's not a lot of attempts. And then 73.1% from the free throw line for Vlad. The other thing to consider, and I'll bring up the stats. They're not a lot of stats, but Vlad did also play for the FIBA Russian team in U18 and U19 competitions, back-to-back seasons. And we'll get into those stats here in a minute. All of this translates for the final season at Michigan to 60.7. Oh, sorry, wrong number here. 65.4% true shooting percentage for Vladislav Goldin with that 5.2 block percentage. So, what do you think of Vlad overall?
As much as Danny Wolf is the non-traditional big man that Michigan has, Vlad is very much the traditional big man that Michigan has. He was a great screener. He's got really, Sam Vecini made this point really well. He's got really like sharp and thick shoulders. Like he just like hits guys, when they come up on a screen, like a tight end going across the middle. Like he just comes up and hits guys. And he's not afraid of that physicality. He really embraced it in the Big Ten. Watching stuff for him today for something else I had coming out for the site. Like he is just he is the hammer instead of the nail in terms of like the physicality stuff, which I really like to see. He was really good in the dunker spot. Obviously played really well next to Danny Wolf. Danny Wolf set him up on a lot of great baskets and stuff. I think the most reliable offense that Michigan had all year was when Danny Wolf was working to make Vlad Goldin to get Vlad Goldin buckets. Obviously Danny Wolf set him up, but someone's got to be there to finish it, right? I thought Vlad Goldin was pretty efficient around the rim. I thought he was a really good rebounder. I thought that he was good, not great defensively. I think that his block numbers kind of similar to the opposite with Danny, where his block numbers were probably a little bit more down just because he's kind of anchoring in towards the rim more so than anything else. Um, overall, as a player, I think that he was Michigan's best player for most of the year. I think that there were certain games that Michigan has no business winning if he's not there. The UCLA game comes to mind where he had his career high of 36 points and just dominated, just dunking all over everybody. Yes, he did experiment with the 3-point shot a little bit. The coaching staff really, really encouraged him to try that out just as a different look to stretch the floor off of the pick and rolls kind of thing. He was fine in those little attempts. The form is there for a good 3-point shot. It's not really his game, to be honest. I don't think that it's something a calling card by any means. It was one of those things where it's like if he was thriving and he made his first few shots, then like, oh, I'm going to try a three, and it went in a good amount of the time. But like you said, he's not going to be. He's not the prolific 3-point shooter that Danny Wolf is. I think that he's going to be your traditional like, hey, put me in the dunker spot, and I'm going to get 5-6 points off the bench. I'm going to play really good defense. I'm going to rebound for you. I'm going to set screens. You're going to use me as a tool as part of your offense and your defensive game plan. And I think every NBA team needs guys like that for depth, right? Like you look at the Lakers, you look at all these teams that needed big men down the stretch of the year, right? Like he could easily fit into a lot of NBA schemes because of the strengths that he has. To be honest, he doesn't have quite a lot of weaknesses. I just don't think there's a ton of upside there in terms of what he can get to as a player. So I see him more as like a mid-second round pick or like a priority undrafted guy.
Yeah, I have Vlad at 53, and I do think he should be drafted, especially at I always say this every year, 46 to 60 in that end of second round. Like that's the ultimate crapshoot. So many of those guys don't work out, and a lot of them that do end up working out are like, oh, they just have a skill set that the transfers easily to the NBA. We don't have to do much to it, and I think Vladislav in this draft, where again after the lottery, I mean, people make argument for anybody. I understand the argument for Cedric Howard. Shout out to Steve Hinson. He and I have been going back and forth on Cedric Howard, but it's the reason why Cedric Howard is such a late riser who now all of a sudden is getting like top 10, top 15 love because it's like, oh, look at the wingspan. Oh, look at the athleticism. And this is something that the rest of the field doesn't have. And when you get to the back end of the second round, I'm like, yeah, just take the guy that at the combine measuring at 7 feet tall without shoes. So he's legitimate like 7'1", 253.4 pounds, and has a 7'5" and 1/4 inch wingspan, which if it wasn't the biggest wingspan at the combine this year, it was like top 2, top 3. It's big. Anything over 7'5", anything over 7'4" is like a gigantic wingspan there. But it does kind of point back to what you said with the block numbers. You thought the block numbers would be better. There's only 51 blocks. And again, if you look at the totals or the averages, it's 1.4 block per game all season, and then it was 1.1 in conference. But again, I'll push back on my own things. Like I think this is where in the Big Ten, like you gotta, especially with centers, you have to realize center play in the Big Ten is very, very old school still. It's the conference of Zach Edey. It's the conference of the Purdue center, pretty much. I think it's kind of what is defined it as. And if you don't have a center, it's like why Khalil Ware went to Indiana, and when you can play well, it's why Omar Ballo transferred to Indiana. And part of the reason probably why Ohio State struggles so much is they didn't have a center like Aaron Bradshaw when he was out. They were just lost at points, and then when he came back, they were a little bit better. So I do think part of it is that way for Vlad, which is again is probably bad for his production and numbers, but in terms of NBA draft stock, I think it shows okay, this is a guy that we can at least put in the backup unit, and we know we'll be able to guard other 7-foot guys there as well. Gets on the glass, 260 rebounds as well. Again, there's not much to say. Let's just dive in the shot chart here in terms of the offense. He's a big man. You want him to screen. He's a great screener. He's a gigantic brick wall. If you're not going to be, shooting threes, if you're not going to be somebody we can give usage to or even have an elbow jumper or something, like number one, you have to be an elite screener, and we don't want to have to teach you that stuff. And it's one of the things that I always say is like, I think trying to find a guy that can already screen really well at an NBA level is actually a hard thing to find. A lot of dudes have to learn it once they get in the NBA. People like roll shift. No, they're no longer the guy anymore. They're no longer like running ISO possessions and stuff. And even guard screeners, like How many times do in any NBA analysis or any draft nerd analysis do we hear, oh, they're a good guard screener, and that's kind of what puts them over the top or gives them a leg up? Is like, yeah, when you have a guy that can screen like that, it just opens up so much more. And I think Vlad, it's like the two things. He's over 7 feet, he can screen, and he can do big man things. 126 shots or 192 shots at the rim, excuse me, for Vlad. Sank 126 of them for 65.6%. Good. I think that's solid. That's totally fine. 74 of 118 in the paint. Number one, that's the most paint shots that we've seen on this show by far. So far, I think the next closest guy had like 70, maybe. So, I mean, boy, oh boy. One of the things I wanted to quote unquote criticize Vlad for is he said he doesn't have many weaknesses, quote unquote. But one of the things I did raise an eyebrow at was he had the highest usage on Michigan at 26.7%. There was a lot of like, hey, throw it into Vlad in the post and he'll back him down. But then you look at the rim numbers, like 65.6%. For me, I was like, I thought they'd be higher. And then I look at the paint numbers, 74 of 118, 62.7%. Like, you know how good that percentage is in the paint? That's like
That's really good.
yeah, that's almost automatic. And like his turnaround shots, his hooks and all that, like it's money. If this is what you want to see when you have a backup big who like, hey, maybe we can throw it into the post and when they get mismatched, it's like, yeah, this is an automatic bucket on a mismatch then for sure. And then everywhere else, like 3 of 6 from one wing, 1 of 3 from another, 7 of 23 from top of the key. That's the only other shot I want to talk about. 7 of 23 from top of the key, 30.4%. That's where it's like, okay, there might be something here to where you're not going to ask him to shoot threes, but behind the scenes, and he actually took some threes. And you look at the free throw percentage again, which was 73.1%. All of it screams like the mechanics are there. And if you look at Vlad's overall free throw percentage, 66.8% across the 5 years. This was his career high if you don't count the like 10 free throws or whatever he shot as a freshman. This is his career high, 73.1%. The mechanics got better pretty much every year, 59.3% as a sophomore, 59.1% as a junior, 66.3% as a fourth year senior. Then this year at Michigan, 73.1%. And if you looked at the conference numbers, 73.9%. And then the last thing to talk about with Vlad is just physical on both ends. And especially with how his offense worked in the paint and at the rim, like he did draw enough free throws there. 59.8%, approaching 60% free throw attempt rate. That's a lot of free throws. That equaled out into the totals of 219, which was by far the number one free throw shooter on this Michigan team. I think that's probably something that goes unsaid about Vlad is like, sure, the game's like kind of old school, and sure, in the NBA, you're probably going to just ask him to like screen and roll. But man, he got to the free throw line so well that it's like, that is still something that in a second unit you want to mismatch. And I feel like this is a Denver guy. Like if Denver somehow snatches up a pick and they need somebody to back up Jokic who can still remain physical and be the better version of DeAndre Jordan. Sorry, DeAndre Jordan. And I mean, you're older, he's still serviceable, but
No need to apologize. He's been watched for 5. No need to apologize. He's been paid millions of dollars to be Kevin Durant's friend and be a really good teammate and stuff. We don't need to. No apology. Sorry if you're listening, DeAndre Jordan, but I think he's fine. Yeah.
you know, I think this is the kind of guy like a Denver team needs, bro. We need a cheap dude that we know can come in and fill a role already that's super physical and that we trust to just screen and do things to keep the physicality on the other side of the ball. So I have Vlad at 53 in the second round, but another fit proof guy where it's like, sure, the real only legitimate concern that you probably do have with him is turnovers. He had 40 assists to 86 turnovers. But I mean, when you're not giving him that amount of usage and you simplify his game and occasionally let him back guys down, I feel like that's going to go away anyway. And if it is a problem, like right away, and he's still turning the ball over, then I guess he's not an NBA player.
Yeah. Tivia, yeah, I guess that could be one thing. I do know that against the right matchup, he didn't dominate everybody like you would assume that he would, looking at these numbers in the Big Ten. I don't. His name's on the tip of my tongue, but the Penn State 7-footer, the one that's been getting a little bit more.
Oh, Yannick. Yannick.
Yeah. Yeah, he guarded Vlad really well in the Penn State matchup. That was the guy that I remember watching that game. I was like, wow, this dude's definitely an NBA player. The way he's able to shut down Vlad and stuff so easily. Maryland also like packed the paint against him and was just super physical with him and stuff, and just knocked him off his spot and stuff. And I do think confidence was a thing for him at times this year. Like if he missed his first few shots, like he definitely was a little more passive on the offensive end and kind of deferred more on the offensive end and stuff. I'm not sure he's ever going to get that usage rate in the NBA. But in terms of just what he is, like he's gonna protect the rim. He's gonna get a few dunks. He's gonna get a score on mismatches. He's gonna be good around the rim. He's gonna make his free throws. Like that's at the very worst, that's a third big man in every single NBA team, right? Like, and with a little bit of upside to be a little bit more than that. So you're not. I'm not sure that there's much room to grow for his game, and like he already has the experience. Like he's already a bit of an older guy. Like he's. I'm not sure there's levels to transform him necessarily, but like it felt like half a dozen teams needed a center down the stretch of the NBA season this past year. So it's like if Vlad can give you 10 or 12 solid minutes and you can trust him out there, then why not take a flyer on him in the second round?
Now, my comfort, Vlad, and I hate this one because I really hate Eastern European guy to Eastern European guy, but it ended up being Ivica Zubac. I thought about Day'Ron Sharp, but Day'Ron Sharp is a really good passer. But it's this the same kind of thing with a Day'Ron Sharp is sure the passing is still there, but really what Brooklyn wants him to do and any team that wants him to do is be the primary backup, be 6'11, 265 pounds, be this big dude, screen, finish, block shots. Like that's all you want to do. So it's probably in terms of like NBA success, quote unquote, it's probably more towards Day'Ron Sharp. But in terms of the skill set, why I say Zubac is because it's the same thing with Zubac. Like until this season, really, like Zubac was just a big dude that was good enough on defense all the time, not gonna get you cooked, but really doesn't shoot, like isn't anything outside of a screener and building his offense there. Occasionally will do things in the post in a mismatch. So I feel like it's that same kind of thing. Whatever the backup version of Zubac is, and even in Zubac, it took a while for him to be a consistent starter. And those kind of guys are always going to succeed in the NBA. Last thing for me on Vladislav Goldin, last 3 seasons, 63.8% true shooting percentage, or last 5 seasons, I should say, his whole college career, 63.8% true shooting. Last 3 seasons at Florida Atlantic, the last two, and the one at Michigan, over 62% true shooting. And then is a good rebounder. And the part that goes uncelebrated, I think, is on the offensive glass. The last 3 seasons has been over a 10% offensive rebounder. I think that is another thing in the NBA where like he can really make his money is being on that offensive glass and getting second chance points while also not cooking your defense, doing the Andre Drummond, hunting for rebounds kind of thing there. This is more disciplined, getting on the glass and helping out your team.
Yeah, I like I said, I don't think he knows what he is. He's not a clear weakness guy. I think that he's got a very high ceiling and or a very high floor as a NBA prospect, and he was always a great interview. He was very funny. He was very he brought a great candor and stuff, and he was always super respectful with his time in the media and stuff. He got engaged towards the end of the season, so I hope he gets in the right situation, and I hope that a team gives him the rope and he gives him a little bit of playing time in the next coming years here.
Yeah, definitely look out for Vladislav Goldin in Summer League. And last thing, again, if you want to look at the FIBA U19 or U18, these are in like 2019 tournaments. If you're not watching on YouTube, posting it up. Babyface Vlad here. Look at how young that guy is.
Oh
Yeah,
wow!
about 13 games in the FIBA U18, U19. Vlad averaged 2.6 points per game, 1.9 rebounds, 0.1 assists. So he didn't get a lot of time, but it is nice to see the film from back then and the development that's gone this far. So last things to look on for Vladislav Goldin on YouTube. College basketball scouting has a nice highlight package of Vlad this last season. It's about 6 minutes, 8 seconds. Go check that out. Big Ten men's basketball has another nice little package. Again, Big Ten men basketball is one of the better YouTube channels operated by conference. I think them and ACC are probably the two best ones of like, hey, let's actually put our film out there for guys to see. And they do a lot of like individual game breakdowns too. So check those out, which again is another Big Ten men's basketball where they have individual game highlights on just Vladislav Goldin there. And there's a March Madness thing on Vlad, all his career, highlights from March Madness, whether he was at Texas Tech, whether he was at Florida Atlantic, whether he was here on Michigan. Dude's had a very, very long career. And then the last one is from Floor and Ceiling about 3 weeks ago. They did a little thing from the NBA comment. It's more of like a YouTube short / TikTok type of video called Vladislav Goldin can be a late hashtag NBA second rounder, which I absolutely agree with for them and with them as well. Anything's on Vlad before we move on to next year's Michigan team?
No, great guy. He's got to he's got to be drafted. I hope he ends up being drafted.
Absolutely, I totally agree. So, real quick, our final thing is next year's team. Number one, we're returning Namari Burnett, we're returning Roddy Gale, we're returning Will Shedder, as well as adding Yasiel Lindenborg. I believe Elliot Cadeau is also an addition. What are your thoughts on next year's Michigan basketball team?
I'm really encouraged by it. I mean, it's the same situation. It's a similar situation as last year, where it's a lot of new faces, and you worry about the chemistry, and you worry about all that. You do now have a year of seeing the situation work, and seeing and having that buy-in and stuff from the guys there, from the coaching staff. I think Roddy Gale's cards started to come on a little bit towards the end of last year. Burnett and Cheddar know what they are. They're going to be really good role players. A lot of people consider Lindenberg to be the best player to enter the portal out of anybody in college basketball. I think the versatility that he has on offense is insane. I think that his defensive ability is also one of his strong suits. Quite frankly, I was shocked that he didn't stay in the NBA draft with how good of a defender he was and how good of a scorer he was, the playmaker that he was. But I mean, he's going to be Michigan's number one scoring option in every single game. He's going to lead Michigan's offense, I think. I think he's going to play really well next to Ellie Cadeau. You do worry about the front court with Michigan losing both the 7-footers, but Morris Johnson from Illinois graded out as one of the best rebounders in all college basketball last season, so he's a welcome addition. Ademara, I'm not sure how to say his first name, but he is a high upside big, probably going to be your backup big, but he started to really turn it on towards the end of last season and stuff. Vlad really did dominate him in that UCLA game, so don't watch that film if you're a Michigan fan. But otherwise, you got LJ Kaysen coming into his own a little bit, probably getting a little more run as a ball handler. And then you got the freshman, 5-star Trey McKinney, I think is going to be a focal point of this offense. I think he'll be one of the first guys off the bench and will have an even bigger role than Kaysen did this past year. And then, there's a couple question marks with Winters Grady. Oscar Goodman got some time with Australia's national team. There was the late commit, Ricky Liburd, who kind of fits that role as like a 3-and-D wing type thing where he might not play a lot, but he's kind of a developmental guy. Overall, looking at the rest of the conference, I mean, let's be honest, it's mid-June. So, like, there's a lot that we don't know and a lot that is settled. But, I mean, the portal is closed. A lot is still uncertain, a lot of these things. But at the same time, like, looking at rosters on paper with the information that we have, Michigan's one of the best teams in the Big Ten in terms of overall talent, in terms of how that talent fits together, in terms of general upside. And now I guess the program has to deal with the burden of expectations a little bit. So we'll see how that comes to be. But I mean, they're going to be projected to be second or third in the conference. I think it'd be at this point, it'd be disappointing if they don't win at least one game in the NCAA tournament. And I'm really looking forward to covering this team again. I guess I'll end it with this, like, with Dusty May at the helm. I've tried to stay objective all year long. I've tried to, put the positivity aside and stuff, but without the shift in terms of development from Jawan's guys to now is ridiculous. And in terms of seeing how much better of a player Wolf got, how much better of a player Golden got, how much better of a player Namari Burnett got just in 1 year under him and his coaching staff, I'm excited to see what these transfers could become, because we often looked at these transfers as what they are already. I'm excited to see what they are going to be in the future with under Dusty May and under the development that Michigan has. And I think that there's a lot to be excited about. As an alum who's a little further removed from it, what are your takeaways from how the haul has gone so far?
I mean, in Dusty, we trust the fact he could turn it around so quickly. And it wasn't just like, hey, I'm going to bring all my, dudes from Florida Atlantic, and it's like the Michigan, Florida Atlantic Owl Wolverine kind of thing. You can tell he's got a plan, he's got a system, he knows how to identify the talent to get it to work. Oh boy, oh boy. Number one, I hate this again. Yasiel, I think, made a terrible decision for his NBA career, but I think obviously personally with the money that they're going to pay him and for coming to a fan base that is going to embrace him, and that a coach that is going to maximize his development.
Yeah.
A very, very good decision on that end. The only reason why I say I think it's a bad decision from an NBA standpoint is he's going to be 24 years old next year. Yasiel Lindenberg. The last 24-year-old to go in first round in the NBA draft was Chris Duarte. If you could think of anybody else between then and now, and this is something that I'll look into and talk about probably a little bit more in the off season. I think NIL is going to have a little bit more of those guys. And there's even some dudes now like Pierre Brooks II from Butler, who originally started at Michigan State, is from Detroit. There are a couple guys that are fighting the NCAA to be granted like a 7th year of eligibility or whatever it is. And partially it has to do with NIL. So I think Yasiel and this Michigan team are going to be a good case study of like, okay, what does that actually do to you, your draft stock? And also like, sure, in the short term right now, fantastic financial decision for Yasiel, but in the long term, if your goal is the NBA, how's it going to turn out? We shall see. I hate to put these kind of expectations on them, but the roster that they lined up, like sleeper title contender. Morris Johnson, I did it in the draft sleeper episode of like, under the radar freshmen who are producing. Rebounder, second to none, a very good athlete. He and Yasiel are the perfect big man teammates for Elliot Cadeau, who doesn't really do much on offense, but he is one of the best playmakers in the NCAA draft. A lot of people tried to argue for Elliot Cadeau as a sleeper in his freshman season before the season started at North Carolina, just because of how great he played like EYBL. He had a lot of dunks, even though he wasn't quite there as a shooter. But I mean, like people were talking about him at like Chris Paul, Rajon Rondo level playmaker coming into that year in his freshman season. And he still is very, very good playmaker. So he's going to find those guys on lobs. This is probably the most athletic front court Michigan maybe has ever had. You know, it's just
Ooh,
yeah. And then
that's
Morez,
intriguing.
yeah, Morez and Yasiel are both really good athletes, and they play the 4 and the 5. And then you add a Daimara into that, who's not necessarily like the jumpy jump athlete. Shout out to Laz Jackson for his term there. But he's another guy that had like top 10 NBA draft potential his freshman seasons, this big man out of Spain who was a really good passer. Like that is the main thing that separated him from the pack of European guys coming over. It's like, man, this guy just has unreal court vision for somebody who's 7'2", maybe has shooting touch. I mean, he's the biggest wild card for this Michigan roster. I think they're going to be good no matter what. But if a Daimara is even half of what a lot of people were trying to hype him up for before he went to UCLA, like this is a team that can make a Final Four run because all the talent's there. And then again, Namari Burnett, Will Shetter, Roddy Gale, they already have the guys that supplement or can even take a step forward. Oh my gosh, if Roddy Gale can get his 3-point shot back, we're talking about a completely different team, right?
I don't know if that's going to happen, but we can dream, can't we? Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot to be excited about, and with Dusty at the helm, it just feels like everything's kind of falling into place at a really good spot. So, I will say with the Lindenberg thing, just touching on it, like I did a breakdown when he was in the midst of his decision and stuff, and essentially most of the draft stuff was saying that he was going to be in the maybe like high teens, low 20s, and that range Michigan would have to pay $3 million in NIL, which is a figure that they could easily get to. And now, in terms of paying the athletes and stuff, I'm not sure I'm not sure he'll get $3 million directly, but NIL deals and stuff makes up for it. And I mean, you just look at, and he did say in an interview with ESPN after his commitment, part of the reason why he committed to Michigan was seeing Danny Wolf's progression and seeing how Danny Wolf transformed himself as a player. So yes, he will be 24 entering the draft process, but it's a unique circumstance with a unique, with all the transfer stuff and with COVID and everything like that. So like, I think that if he proves to himself to be one of the best players in college basketball, he's going to get drafted no matter what his age is. So.
Yeah, we'll see. Again, I'll talk about this in more detail in the off season, but guys like this that test twice. This is the second time that Yasiel has gone through the pre-draft process, put his name out there, and then withdrew it. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head who did that and then ended up being a first round pick or ended up being a success in the NBA. But again, NIL changes a lot of things. And imagine that Danny Wolf came in super raw, didn't really have a 3-point shot yet, could kind of play make and do stuff. Yasiel comes in with all that stuff already. Fantastic
I've
assist.
learned to expect the unexpected with Dusty May at the helm. And so I'm gonna expect the unexpected and defer towards the positive when it comes to
I
that.
mean, I expect Yasiel to be a 20-point per game scorer. Like, and that's not even, I don't even think that's like putting too much pressure on him because of how good he was already at UAB. And then you surround him with all this other talent already in Dusty's system. Not out of the realm of possibility. Actually,
I would say he's not that. It might be something might have went wrong. To be honest, like I think I think that like 17, 18 is like the expectation. To be honest, and yeah, he's gonna be the lead guy on this team, and it's gonna be super exciting to watch.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So yeah, thank you, Kellen, for always joining us here every year, and especially anytime we got Big Ten or Michigan basketball. I mean, there's nobody better than Kellen Voss of MaizeandBrew.com. Kellen, let everybody know where they can find you online before we get out of here.
Yeah, X page. I post all my articles to there. Kellen __ Voss. And then right for MaizeandBrew.com, got a bunch of breakdowns of this year's team and stuff. We'll have some draft breakdowns of what the teams that end up drafting Wolf and Goldin can expect from them. And yeah, we'll push along towards the season and stuff. And yeah, just with Dusty May at the helm, the future is bright. So thank you for having me, Steve. And I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Then I'd be remiss too if I didn't say let everybody know about your shirt here because it's a fantastic shirt. I wish I was there.
Yeah, I bought this. So I don't know if you guys can see this on YouTube, but I bought this at Game 6 of the Pistons playoff game. It says I was a Pistons fan before it was cool. Now, to be fair, I'm only 26, so I mean I did suffer through that whole gauntlet from like 2008 until like this past year in terms of Pistons suffering and whatnot. So I felt like I was worthy of having the shirt. I felt like I had suffered enough in order to earn the shirt. And I had $43. So, yeah, I just, I'm a long suffering Detroit sports fan, but with the Pistons on the up and up and the Tigers me up and up and the Lions me up and up, it kind of feels like things are starting to finally align in my direction. So
41 years old. I think you have more of a right to that than I do. I've at least seen titles. I've at least lived and experienced the runs and all that stuff. So yeah, especially anybody that had to live through this Troy Weaver era. Brutal, brutal.
very brutal.
So
Good luck,
yeah, I think
Pelican. Good luck.
yeah. Ugh, I know. Don't get me started on that. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us again. We'll catch you next time. We'll go to